Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where in the world you're joining us from today. Thank you all for joining. And we're really looking forward to a truly inspirational, thought-provoking conclusion to our PURÂ NAVA series of talks that we've been having over the last 6 or 7 weeks. So for those of you who haven't already, you can go to Bhavan's YouTube channel and catch up on the talks that you might have missed, and those are going to be there forevermore in case you want to go and review this series of talks. Now, without further ado, I'm going to hand over straight to Subhanu so that he can really continue the story. Subhanu, thank you. Welcome back, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Raghu. Om Vasudeva Sutan Devam Kansa Chanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagat Gurum. That verse salutes Krishna as the Guru, the teacher of the universe, which is appropriate today because Krishna will be our guide. In this final lecture, we try and bring everything together from the previous 3 lectures through the lens of the Bhagavad Gita and try and bring out some implications, some suggestions, how one can incorporate these amazing teachings into one's day-to-day practice. So that will be the plan. As always, I will speak for half an hour, 40 minutes, and then take questions. So if you want to start queuing up questions in the chat bar on Facebook, then please go ahead and do that. So if you remember going back to the first lecture, we talked about this vast, incredible Vedic tradition. The Vedas, each having 4 sections, the mantras, the what, the how, the Brahmanas, the why, the start of philosophical inquiry, the Aranyakas, and the distilled essence of the why, the final section, the Vedanam Antaha, the Vedanta, and how then the teachings of the tradition that talk about how we are way more than just this material bodily form, and that we have a deep and fundamental connection with the universe, part of a universal reality, a consciousness we call Atman, and how to help people understand those teachings, epics were written that told the stories of the teachings through the lives of great inspirational leaders in the past. There is a famous verse, Mahajano yena gataha sapanthaha, that the way the great live their lives, let that be your guide, your path. The words are one thing, but how someone has lived their life is another, and that's where the epics fit in. But also, some of our deepest learnings come from those intimate moments between the teacher and the student, where the magic is created, where instructions can be given in a very direct way. And that's why the Bhagavad Gita is revered, loved, lauded. I don't know how many more epithets I could use for this incredible piece of literature as a teaching between Krishna and Arjuna. So the Bhagavad Gita is part of the Vedanta Prasthanatrayi, the 3 canon texts that illuminate the teachings of the Vedanta. What are those 3? The first is the so-called Shruti Prasthana, the source texts themselves, the Upanishads. You then have what's called the Nyaya Prasthana, which is the Brahma Sutram, which are lecture notes on the Upanishads. Nyaya meaning logic. Then you have the Smriti Prasthana, as found in the Smriti text, the Mahabharata, and that is the Bhagavad Gita. And in the verses that praise the Bhagavad Gita, it's called the distilled essence of all the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. of the Upanishads in the Bhagavad Gita. Sarvopanishado Gavaha. If you consider the whole Upanishads like a herd of cattle, Dogdha Gopalanandanaha, the cow herd is Krishna. Partho Vatsaha, the calf, hungry for knowledge, thirsty for knowledge, is Arjuna. Sudhir Bhokta, the nourishment is pure wisdom. Dugdham Gitamritam Mahate, and the milk that comes from this herd of cattle, as the Upanishads, is the sweetest, most wonderful nectar that is the Gita. So the Gita is, again, a further distilled essence of the teachings of the Vedic tradition. And it's told in a very special place, which is at the start of the apocalyptic battle that we described last time, that is the culmination of the story of the Mahabharata, where a family is pitted against itself in a fight for power, for kingship. We have the good versus the evil. The side of the good, the 5 brothers, the Pandavas. But when they had a choice of having either Krishna or his army, chose Krishna. Arjuna said, I just want you. You're my friend. You're my guide. It's of course a triumph of the spirit over the material. The other side chose Krishna's army, something that's perishable. And Krishna became the charioteer. And as so often happens in life, you need a jolt. You need something to shake you up, to question the life you've been living and its meaning and purpose. And that's what happens to Arjuna at the start of the battle. And it's the first chapter of the Gita, where he asks Krishna, Senayor Ubhayor Madhye Ratham Sthapayamechyuta. You could almost feel the pride and the arrogance in just the Sanskrit there. Take me to the middle of the battlefield. Let me go and see my enemies and who we're going to vanquish. And by that point, Arjuna had proven himself the greatest warrior and had won many battles. So this should have been a fairly straightforward occurrence. As he stood there, he looked across the other side. He saw his family members, cousins. He saw his teachers, his gurus, his grandparents. He saw many he cared for, and he was lost. And he suddenly felt, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? And, beautiful the way it's described, Gandivam Samsvate Hastat, his bow just fell from his hands, and his hair stood on end, and he just didn't know what to do. And then he turns to Krishna, and the tone changes from Ratham Sthapayamechyuta Shishyasteham, I'm your student. Guide me. What should I do? I don't think I can fight the enemy, because the enemy are people who are dear to me. And he sits back down in his chariot and says, Nayotsya iti Govinda, I don't want to fight. I'm going to stop. Done. Finished. And that's when Krishna then takes on the lesson. Now, the mistake you could make is that, therefore, the teaching of the Gita as a teaching to go to war and fight. Okay? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the setting of a battlefield in a battle is a metaphor for the battlefield of life. Okay? And how do you face the challenges of life where, as I often say to people, if you live life, life will happen to you, good and bad. The heart of the Ganesh Puja we do at the start of every prayer ceremony is not just to say, may only good things come my way. That cannot happen if you live your life. The good and the bad will come. How do you cope with that? How do you deal with that? How do you not get blown off course one way or the other, either through over-elation on the joy side or over-despair on the sadness, the tragedy side, because both will hit you in life. And that's the state that Arjuna gets to. He cannot process the emotions he's having. And Krishna is there as his guide. And with that jolt, it's opened him up for that knowledge. I think we said in a previous lecture, the second one, you have to be ignorant and available. You have to not know the truth of the universe, but be available to hear it. Many of us shut ourselves off from that. You know, we think we know everything. We keep going. We're fine. We're good. Teachings are not for such people. Equally, if you're fully enlightened, the teachings are useless also. You have to be available to that knowledge. And this life jolt that Arjuna got opened him up for that. If we're lucky in life, we're somehow given the conditions early that we're naturally inquisitive for this kind of knowledge and drawn to it. For others, they hit that kind of a wall and they look for guidance and inspiration. And so the Gita is also one text that you can pick up almost on any page and find something that you can hang on to and to inspire you. And that's why those who follow the Indian Hindu tradition have copies of Gita by their bedsides. If you go to hotels in India, you find Bible, you find Gita in there as well. You also find the Quran in the hotels. So that guide is there for people if they want it. And Krishna tells this story. What now we have in our hands is over totally 18 chapters. The first chapter being the introduction of Arjuna's Vishada Yoga, his despair that comes when he sees the other side on the battlefield, and the teaching starts proper. Chapter 2. In fact, many have said this, that Krishna could have just wrapped up the teaching in chapter 2, because pretty much all he had to say was captured in the second chapter. So over 70 verses, beautiful. So it's a tenth of the total length, where he reveals to Arjuna his true nature is not this mere body. It's something greater. It's this luminous being that's within him, all around him, that is him, the Atman. And through that, he should not grieve, because life and death are only seen for the material, not the permanent. And he gives the whole teaching. Then for various reasons, Arjuna must have been so inspired, he had further questions. Krishna felt the need to further elaborate. And so the teaching is over those total 18 chapters. It takes about 3.5 hours to recite. And many people do Gita Parayanam of these 700 shlokas, and take inspiration from the chanting as well as the meaning. And what we'll do today is talk a little bit about what are some of those key messages. I will try and give you some of the verse references. I won't be able to cover all 700 verses, only a fraction in the time we have, so that you can go and look them up for yourselves. And again, the purpose of these talks is not so much to spoon-feed knowledge, but to open your eyes to a world of wisdom that's waiting for you to go and study yourselves. With teachers at institutions like the Bhavan here in the UK. If you're listening from other countries, such institutions will be there, most likely where you live. And it's this invitation that's being extended from these ancient voices. Come and hear what we have to say to make your life a fulfilled life. And if you were to summarize the teaching, and there are many ways you can, but one way to do it is Krishna essentially tells Arjuna to live his life as who he really is, which is a being of infinite possibility, and not to constrain himself with a small, narrow-minded view of who he is and what's happening around him. He's a warrior, and a warrior's duty is to fight for what's right, to establish dharma, right conduct. That's the oath and the vow that he took. Those who take up Vedic study take also a similar oath and vow, which is to master what they are taught so they can then teach others. And you take two parts of that oath, swadhyaya pravachanabhyam na pramaditavyam. Don't just neglect your study, but your ability to pass on to others. That's an oath and a vow you take because that's your calling. That's your role in life. The warrior's role in life is to fight. He was a warrior. He trained to be a warrior. He has to fight because he's on the side of right. You could argue on the other side, they felt they were on the right, which is why, through one lens, and it's said in the Mahabharata, even a Duryodhana was fulfilling his duty by being a warrior. So this message of follow your calling, do it full of conviction, but in a spirit of love, compassion, and service. That's the distinguishing feature in Krishna's teaching. That the knowledge you gain creates a certain set of inner conditions that allows you to live a life beyond yourself that can contribute to the betterment of the world around yourself. That's the heart of what Krishna tells us. And he starts by, as I said, telling Arjuna that he is more than this body. He's a luminous being of infinite possibility. And that Atman can never be created nor destroyed. Najayate mriyate va kadachit nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah. Ajo nitya shashvato yam purānaha, eternally ancient. Nahanyate hanyamane sharire, cannot be cut or killed even when the body is killed. That's Gita chapter 2, verse 20. And through one's life, the body may undergo modifications. Modern biology tells us that most of the cells in your body are no more than a few years old. You know, we know that who we were as babies, that bodily form is very different to who we are, but we still say, I am Subhanu, this is Raghu. There's some essence in us that goes deeper than just even the DNA as to our nature as we perceive it. And the analogy is given that then that continues through multiple lifetimes, and the way we discard old clothes, vasamsi chirnani yatha vihaya navani granhati nuropana rani. So we throw off old clothes to get new clothes. So tatha sharina rani vihaya jirnani anyani sanyati navani dehi. Same, the embodied casts off old bodies to take on new. That's again chapter 2, verse 22. And even with arrows and spears flying around, the body may get hurt, but the Atman doesn't. Nainan chindanti shastrani, nainan dahati pavakaha, it cannot be burnt by fire. Nachakle dayantyapaha, can't be made wet by water. Nashoshayati marutaha, or blown aside by the winds. And what's Krishna's purpose of telling this to Arjuna? It's one of the earliest forms of appreciative inquiry. Which is this ability to build on what is strong, what is positive. You know, when you approach a project at work and it doesn't succeed, what do most managers do? So, right, what went wrong? Who do we blame? Versus asking the question, well, what actually worked? What went right? How do we build on that next time? So the way you extract learnings from a situation can totally change the energy and the mindset you have, how you approach a challenge. And that's what Krishna is doing to Arjuna. He is saying there's something stronger in you, something deeper that is more permanent. That means you should cast off these worries and you should do your duty and fight. Now that's all great in theory, but how do we then get drawn into the challenges of the world? Well, that's actually, that problem statement is asked very directly by Arjuna in the 3rd chapter, where he says, Athakena prayukto yam papam charati purushaha. So impelled by what do people do bad acts? Anichan api varshneya. Even if they are not willing to do it, we know what's right and wrong. We get drawn to terrible acts. Baladeva niyojitaha, as if pulled by some force. That's chapter 3, verse 36. And Krishna gives the response, Kama esha, krodha esha, rajoguna samudbhava. The root cause is desire and anger. Kama esha, krodha esha, rajoguna samudbhava. Mahashano mahapapma vidyaina miha vairinam. No, these two are the enemies, the all-consuming, all-powerful enemies. And it comes because the way the human condition is set up. We mentioned that the Upanishads have said that we are naturally seen built to seek the answers outside us and form connections and attachments to things around us. We are built to externalize in the first instance. And that leads to a certain cause and effect situation, which also Krishna tells us back in the second chapter, verse 62. He says, Dhyayato vishayan pumsaha. When we think of on things, sangas teshu pajayate, we get attached to them. Maybe a bottle of champagne or water or something, we get attached to it. Sangat sanjayate kama. From that attachment comes kama, desire. Kamat krodho vidyayate. From that desire, when it's not fulfilled, comes krodha, anger. Krodhat bhavati sammohaha. From that anger comes confusion. Who's been able to think clearly and straight when you're furious? Very hard. The first thing that comes out. Sammohat smriti vibhramaha. So through that confusion, you forget notions of right and wrong. Smriti bhramshat, when that is destroyed, buddhi nashaha, your intellect is destroyed. Buddhi nashat pranashyati. When your intellect is hammered like that, you're finished. So that's the simple cause and effect that Mother Nature has provided. And you can either take it as inevitable and live driven by your desires, driven by the whims that carry you around. In the Kathopanishad, it's seen as riding a chariot with 5 wild horses being your senses. They'll just take you wherever they go. That may be fun for a while. You get pretty dizzy and exhausted after a while of being on a wild chariot ride with no direction, with no purpose, with no meaning. And there's something about the nature of acts driven by desire and anger, pleasure, that very act burns up any enjoyment you get out of it, so you crave for more. And that's the lesson that Krishna wants to give as the root cause of the problem statement that Arjuna asks. So what's the solution to this? That's when Krishna spends 18 chapters taking him through. But in essence, you can basically mention that Krishna tells Arjuna how to create the inner conditions for a higher knowledge to dawn on him. So he hankers for the permanent. He connects with a deeper truth, a deeper bliss within himself. And certain acts, sadhanas, yogas, as it's called, help you unite with that higher truth. Yoga, the root yuj, uniting, union. And what are those acts? So, there's a verse in the 18th chapter, Tyajyam dosha vadityeke karma prahur manishina. Some people mistakenly assume the Gita's message is do nothing, no action. We're not acting, we're not doing anything, we just sit, we contemplate the universe. So some people say, Tyajyam dosha vadityeke karma prahur manishina. We should abandon all actions. But others say, yajna dana tapah karma. Yajna, sacred offerings, dana, giving, charity, tapaha, acts of contemplative meditation, penance, natyajam iti chapare, some say. And then this is chapter 18, verse 3, and then the subsequent verse 5, it says, yajna dana tapaschaiva natyajam karyameva tat. Yajna dana tapah karma natyajam karyameva tat. You should not abandon these 3 kinds of activities. It must be done. Why? Yajno danan tapaschaiva pavanani manishinam. Yajna, dana, and tapaha are the purifiers of beings. So certain acts elevate you. And we talked about in the Vedic lecture how the whole momentum of one's sadhana is to turn an external offering to an internal offering. You see in this, live your life in a spirit of giving, service, compassion, That's what elevates you and takes you towards the light and away from the darkness. Living your life as a yajna. And this is one of the most powerful messages that the Gita tells us. And the way Krishna says to do it is make work your worship. Make work your act of offering and dedicate it to some higher purpose. He says in the second chapter again, verse 47, Karman is a very famous verse. Many of you would have heard it. Karmanyeva dhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Your right is to act, but not the fruits of the action. Ma karma phala heturbhuhu. Don't desire these fruits of what you do. Ma te sangostu akarmani. But equally, don't take that as an excuse to do absolutely nothing. Enjoy your work in the first instance for what it is, not what it gets you. We'll see later on. It means in this day and age, if you're fortunate enough to have choices, to seek out that which brings you joy, passion, and make that your career. But the message here is enjoy your work for what it is, work as worship. That starts taking you on this path. The ability to act selflessly, the ability to do your work, not for what it's going to get you, but just simply for what it is, elevates your energy, your being, and is the start of this inner transformation. And tie that with a thirst for knowledge, and you start seeing a path forward, a sadhana to bring you this higher truth. When I say transformation, it's important to not confuse that to say the teaching is you're going from state A to state B, and somehow you go on this mystical journey through multiple dimensions and planets and so on. You have always been this luminous, illustrious being, but your confusion has deluded you to your true nature. And Swami Vivekananda said it beautifully. We've put our own hands on our eyes and said we are blind. We can't see because we're caught up in the maelstrom of chasing the material, where our senses will take us, and that's confused our mind. The analogy I think we talked about last time was the difference between a shallow river just with lots of foam and just noise versus a deep, deep river, ocean. Those will be flutters on the top, but there's absolute silence and calm underneath. And the teachings are just there to lift your eyes, to take away that confusion, so you can see who you really are. And that journey is a metaphorical journey. You're not going anywhere. You've always been there. You've always been who you are. You just think you're something else. It's one of the key teachings of Krishna in the Gita. And this notion of selfless action, work as worship, we often call karma yoga, but people say are the first 6 chapters of the Gita. Now, if you ally that with a spirit of love and surrender, that bhakti, compassion, which is what some people will say are the next 6 chapters, chapters 7 to 12. When you combine work as worship with a spirit of compassion, love and giving, it fructifies as knowledge, jnana, which people say are the last 6 chapters, 13 to 18, together with the tools and techniques of being contemplative, mindful, dhyana. That is your complete journey. And some people will also explain the Gita that says those different pieces, if you like, or elements of the journey to ultimate truth. You can pick whichever one suits your nature. Those who are just, by nature doers, follow karma yoga. Those who want to live a life of service, follow bhakti. Those who are more contemplative, follow the Raja Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and ultimately culminating in knowledge, the path of knowledge, Jnana Yoga. But they're really all manifestations of the same path. My dear friend and guru, Dr. Nandakumara, would say to us as we're learning Sanskrit, Vina Jnanam Kuto Bhaktihi. Vina bhaktim kutaschatat. Without knowledge, where does bhakti come from? And without bhakti, where do you find that? So our pursuit is not a dry intellectual pursuit. That's one of the important messages that come through an understanding of the balance of the path of love, action, and service. It is not about just analyzing a text and suddenly saying, I've got it, and trying to be the smartest person in the room. Creating those inner conditions creates a deep feeling of connection, compassion within you that people will perceive around you if that's genuine and authentic. And that ability to combine and understand that knowledge and bhakti are different sides of the same coin is a way to step away from the debates. Well, is this path the right one or that one? That will all take you ultimately to that highest knowledge. Again, in chapter 4, verse 33, Krishna tells us, Sarvang karma khilam partha jnane parisamapyate. All acts, when done in the spirit of yajna service, take you to this higher knowledge and allow you to turn the eye within and make external action an offering and internal offering. And that starts touching on a place of silence within you that leads to a very deep and profound concept that is hard to explain, but easy to experience if you experience it, which is this notion of actionless action. It's in the Gita, in the 4th chapter, verse 18. Karmanya karmayah pashyed karmani cha karmayah sabuddhiman manusyeshu siyukta kritsna karmakrit. I guarantee you could take many lifetimes to understand this verse, which is, he who sees action in inaction and inaction in action is truly wise. Now, what does that mean? It's about elevating yourself to being versus simply doing. Making everything you do a truly mindful act, a truly contemplative experience, somehow detaches it from I am doing X to procure Y. This notion of being, acting as work as worship, not for its fruit, has at its heart that you elevate what you do to a point where you've transcended the very notion of acting or doing something, because everything has become just an act of giving, of love, of sacrifice. And there's a beautiful story that's told about the sages Vasishtha and Vishwamitra. We met them when we talked about Ramayana. I quoted the verse when they were actually enemies trying to fight each other, where before Vishwamitra was a sage, he was a king who wanted this Kamadhenu from Vasishtha. Well, they became good buddies. And later in life, they lived opposite a river. And Vasishtha with his wife was on one side and Vishwamitra on the other. And every morning and evening, Vasishtha's wife would go and take food for Vishwamitra. So it so happens on one day, she went to go and give food to Vishwamitra on the other side of the river, and the river was a raging torrent, and she couldn't walk across. She'd be swept away. She didn't know what to do. Her husband saw her just hesitating and confused on the riverbank and said, what's the problem? He said, well, I can't get across. So Vasishtha says to his wife, well, say this to the river. If Vishwamitra if Vishwamitra is on an eternal fast, please calm down the waters. So she goes, hang on, he's going to be eating. How does that become an eternal fasting? He eats, right? But she says it, and the water's calm. She walks across, gives Vishwamitra his food. When he comes to come back, the river's a raging torrent once again, and again she hesitates, doesn't know how to get across. Vishwamitra asks what's happening. She explains, I can't get across. So Vishwamitra says, okay, say to the river, if my husband Vasishtha is an eternal celibate, may the river just calm so I can cross. Now she's really confused because they're married. They live as husband and wife with all the physical pleasures that come with it. She says it, the river calms, and she gets across. and she's totally confused. And this is when Vasishtha teaches her and explains how when you act in a selfless way and offer everything you do, it transcends the act itself. And this is also beautifully explained around the ancient Vedic ceremony, the Agni Hotra. The Agni Hotra is the morning and evening fire offering you do. If you, in the ancient times and even modern times, conduct these great yajnas we talked about in the first lecture, where there are 3 fires lit, you have to maintain them. And it's done by milk offering, morning and evening offering, Agni Hotra. The Brahmana portion for the Agni Hotra offering is itself, I feel like an Upanishad. It's the first chapter of the second book in the Taittiriya branch. But in the great Shatapatha Brahmana of the Shukla Yajurveda tradition, at one point it describes that could be the physical Agni Hotra, but the very act of eating becomes an Agni Hotra. It becomes your offering. The act of union becomes your Agni Hotra. The act of walking becomes your Agni Hotra, becomes your offering, and that transcends action in some way. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you suddenly, you're kind of floating through space and looking at yourselves, I'm not acting. It's somehow something much deeper. It's hard. It's not easy to explain, but how living a life of giving, of offering, of being fully present in the moment, you lose yourself in that moment. It transcends the act itself. So those of you who have proficiency in some art of music, dance, may have had this experience that as you dance or as you're playing an instrument, you lose yourself in the moment. And you're somehow not playing, you're being one with the music. Think about that experience and that elevated bliss you get. Well, imagine if that becomes part of your being every second of every day. That's a little bit the hint that Krishna gives to us and gives to Arjuna. And behind this comes this notion of the balance that comes, samattam yoga uchyate, that, not the extreme one way or the other. The Buddha talked about the middle path, the middle way. When this is done well, it centers you. Often when we do leadership assessments, we will ask, well, that person's a centered individual. They're not blown off course one way or the other. They have some anchor, some inner compass that roots them. That's samattam yoga uchyate. And then Krishna does say that I may be your guide, your catalyst, but you have to step up and make this happen for yourself. He says in the 6th chapter, verse 5, Uddhared atmanatmanam. The self has to lift the self up. Na atmanam avasadayet. You should not let the self fall by itself. Atmaiva hyatmano bandhuhu. The Atman, the self, is its own best friend. Atmaiva ruparatmanaha. And its own worst enemy. So if you choose to put in that effort, it will lift you. If you don't, it won't help you. No, our tradition is not a call to blindly just put all of your fate and your actions in some teacher or someone else and let them lift you up all on their own. You have to stand up. My grandfather taught me a beautiful Urdu verse growing up, Kashti pe baithne ka salika bhi chahiye. Kashti ke zimmewar fakat na khuda nahi, meaning there's a technique to actually sitting on a boat. The responsibility is just not of the boat person, the boatman. And that's a little bit what Krishna is saying. Look, I'm giving you these teachings, but you've got to step up and take the lesson and do something with it. The final important lesson, and then let's talk to some modern implications that Krishna gives, is the power of mind training. How the mind is the barrier, but also the window, and how we saw earlier the metaphors of an untrained mind, an unbalanced mind, just follows the senses willy-nilly without control. And Krishna says, he has the verse of mind training in the Gita, the chapter 6, verse 35, Asamshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam. I get it, Arjuna. The mind, manaham durnigraham, is hard to control, chalam, and wanders. Abhyasena tu kaunteya. through practice, Kaunteya, Panjana, Vairagyena, through dispassion, discipline, Jagrihyate, it can be grasped. So commit yourself to mind training. And these dhyana yoga, raja yoga paths teach you the paths of contemplation, meditation that get further distilled in other traditions. So Zen Buddhism, Zen comes from Zazen, comes from Dhyanam, the Sanskrit word, which is a complete focus on meditation, mind training to unlock those powers of altruism, compassion, and silence within you. But we have it here in the Gita. That's the verse praising mind training. And then Krishna also tells us that even a little bit of this will help you. You know, one of the biggest tendencies I find is, oh, I'd love to study Veda or this. I have no time. I'm too tired, and I'll do it tomorrow. Well, he says, Swalpamasya apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even a little of this dharma will save you from great fear. Find 5-10 minutes. You've found the time to listen to this talk. That's wonderful. Imagine if you devoted 10-15 minutes a day to some mindful practice or some practice of giving or your own self-study. It builds up. It compound interest itself. And I think we quoted the verse, knowledge is that wealth that the more you spend, the more you use it, it grows. So he says, just, lean in and do some of this. In our Vedic chanting classes, we're learning the Shanti mantras, and the goal there is not to teach everyone all 1,000 pages, 48 hours reciting of the Krishna Yajurveda, but to master a few mantras perfectly so that you are able to recite those as they were recited in the Bronze Age. And having mastered them, it allows you to pass them on in perfect condition. So whatever you do, just do it well, and sometimes less is more. Is also one of those lessons that you find in the Gita. So let's pull out some modern implications of those. Well, just through my business career, I've been amazed how many times things I've heard have resonated with the teachings of the Gita, and I just want to highlight a few of those. The first of this notion of doing what you love and enjoying your work for what it is, not what it gets you. I was in a negotiation analysis course at INSEAD, and the topic came up on a certain decision tree exercise, and it went into this area of career planning, and the professor said, just imagine you're up for a job and you're doing it as a stepping stone to something, but the other candidate is doing it just because they love it. They love what they do. Well, just think about who's going to stay up that extra hour to get the work done, who will explore avenues to move something forward compared to you. They'll be more successful. So why waste your time on that? And it comes because many of us have an enormous privilege. We are able to choose to some extent what we can or can't do. That's not there for everyone. And Krishna there says, well, find the joy in whatever you do. Find some way to dedicate it to some purpose. But this notion of, early in one's life, helping our children understand, what they're good at and what they love, and helping them make that their career, their calling, is a lesson that I think some of us parents have to go through. And not every child has to be an accountant, has to be an engineer. They're not built for that. And I've seen that in our own family, that when we allowed our children to follow what their passion is, how they blossom, and what a mistake it would have been to make them something they're not. Maybe he would be, but if Sachin Tendulkar was made to become an accountant or a chef, we would have lost one of the world's greatest cricketers. So think about that as something to inculcate in your children early about career planning. And it may be controversial for some who still have certain notions as to what a successful career is. A successful career is when someone is happy and fulfilled and doing something where they feel they're making a difference. And I think that's very relevant in modern age, and something I see the younger generation really wanting to make sure they're doing things where they think it adds value to them and the world around them, which comes to that second message. Living life as a yajna is about leading and living with meaning and purpose. So one of the hot areas in the business world is how to build purpose-led organizations. And having a purpose beyond profit is the key in what we understand is to drive superior employee engagement. And we know higher engagement drive results. This is exactly the notion of living one's life dedicated to a higher purpose, a yajna. And there's some amazing examples throughout the corporate world of that. By the way, coming back to the first point, it should not surprise you that some of the most successful businessmen and entrepreneurs are that because they have done what they loved. They followed their passion early in life. They didn't follow a certain path. Yet life's too short to live it as a stepping stone. But they also had something they wanted to achieve. They wanted to leave some lasting legacy. It's one of the messages of the ancient Babylonian text, the Gilgamesh, which is your deeds live beyond you. So make sure your deeds have meaning, have purpose, have impact. One of the examples I often quote is that of Matsushita, the great Japanese businessman, who after the Second World War gave his organization the mission to rebuild his country, Japan, and JVC, National Panasonic, all companies that he created. I'm watching a science fiction show called The Expanse, where they're colonizers of Mars, and they have a unifying purpose of changing a lifeless rock into a garden. Imagine what that does for you when you show up. The company I used to lead, Cipla, was founded by a fellow of Mahatma Gandhi. People come to work saying we're doing Mahatma Gandhi's bidding because he visited the factory and he told people in 1939, put the health of the nation before profit. Imagine the engagement and the power it gives to your people. So think about that. But to lead with purpose, you have to have a purpose yourself. You have to think about what you want your life to stand for and what legacy you want to leave. And we take young managers through exercises now to help them start to get an idea of that. And it's not easy, and it takes time to find your calling sometimes. And one simple exercise we give people, and like who may remember this, we did this with some folks in some of the retreats, was if you imagine your life is a book, and events are like chapters in a book, what's the title of your book? Just as a way to think about, what do I want my life to stand for? And if you go through that exercise, it could open up some fascinating vistas for you. I think the next area that is much, neglected these days is the importance of being a mindful, reflective leader. Some of us, we've been going every year to the Academy of Management, talking about how do you build a purpose-led organization with mindful leaders. The model of successful leaders seems to be these days those that react to the last thing they heard, decisive, judgmental, get things done. Well, let me tell you what happens as you get more senior in an organization. You first need to figure out what on earth is going on. You need to be able to listen. You need to be able to absorb. You need to be able to reflect. The Sanskrit word for a wise person, remember, Brahma, was Shrutavan, one who listens well. And so when I'm creating boards of companies, I don't want board members who will come and just spout knowledge as to what they know. I want those who will sit, take the time to listen, understand, and then advise. And in one's career, we get to a certain point by being seen as judgmental, decisive. We just act, we do things. But suddenly we get asked as a CEO and beyond to listen, to learn, to reflect. One of the most valuable times I put in my calendar is reflection time, so I can make sense of everything that's happening. And that's where mind training can really help. These mindful practices to train you to take the time out from yourself, regroup, collect your thoughts and come up with a plan of action. I think we've got a couple of minutes left and then we'll do some questions. This message of living a life love, service, and passion applies, as we said in the Mahabharata lecture. Leadership is an act of service. It's not a privilege, it's not a right, it's an act of service. And if you read the ancient texts, and even if you read Gita, it talks about the value of a leader to uplift others, inspire others, and the absolute honor it is to be in a position to lead. And you have to first lead yourself. So these disciplines, these sadhanas, creating those inner conditions for knowledge, allow you to have mastery over yourself, so that you're not blown off course in a storm, in a crisis. You're seen as grounded, as centered. That all comes together in you do leadership assessments. That he or she is calm in a crisis. Well, that means something. That says something about the person. They have a certain way of managing their internal energy. And I gave the Gandhi quote last time. But leadership as service, I think, is a very important message. So what are some just tips then that you can try and follow coming through the teachings of the Gita? If you get a chance, go through some of these exercises to kind of understand your life's purpose. Think a bit about periodic, not every day, but every now and then come back and just check in with yourself. What do I want my life to stand for? And this notion of trying to follow your passion and where you are excellent at, and use that to build out your career, where if you're able to do that. If you're unable to do that, whatever you're doing, find what gives you joy in that and amplify that. Think about the purpose it's fulfilling. This notion that comes through all of this, yajna, dana, tapah, karma, practice giving on a regular basis. I talked about last time how many studies shows that those who regularly give, who are grateful, who practice gratitude, lead a more fulfilled life. And it just takes a little to bring you a lot of joy. We heard recently, we watched a TV show as a family, and someone's grandfather said, giving is the most selfish act you can do because of the joy it gives you, and that's fine. Shraddhaya deyam, it says in the Upanishads. This notion of practice giving on a regular basis, and take those practices, be around people who just project, infuse spirit of love and compassion. There's certain meditative techniques that allow you to do that. In Asia, it's practiced Tonglen meditation as a way of taking in energy and giving out positive energy through the transformative power of meditation to those in distress, in need. There are all ways of inculcating and practicing meditation. Take up some mind training, as we talked about, some exercise. Mind training could be learning an instrument. It could be a certain discipline, but various mindfulness practices, and build that into what you do, and never lose that thirst for knowledge, never lose that joy the children have of learning new things, of understanding the world around. I have the privilege of seeing our granddaughter and the way she looks and takes things in and is just learning about the world. And I thought, my God, that's wonderful. And you have this beautiful poem by Samuel Uman on youth, where he talks about dying a young man at the age of 80. And that's that spirit of be the eternal inquisitive youth. And as you do that, then the destination actually ultimately becomes less important, because you realize the journey you're on is the destination, if it's lived in a certain way, if it's lived in this fulfilling way, so that you can look back on your life, as we said in previous lectures, and not ask the question, what did I take from this world, but what did I give? And if you lived a life where you gave more than you took, you've lived a fulfilled life. So these are some of the teachings that come out of the Bhagavad Gita from Krishna to Arjuna, that we can apply in our everyday lives. With all of these things, practice. The athletes train years to reach the Olympics. The time people put into practice and train their bodies, spend time to train and develop muscle, internal muscle, in your spirit, in your soul, in your inner being. And you may find that a wonderful journey. So with that, we'll end the lecture today. And over back to Raghu.
Thank you very much, Subhanu. So we have a few questions.
Yeah.
And of course, inviting anyone who's tuned in to post your questions on Facebook, and we'll see how many we can get to. So the first question I have is, I remember you coming and presenting at some of these leadership workshops that we were running for teenagers, right? Sort of late 2000s, early noughties. And one of the things I clearly remember is you encouraging these groups to think about their 10,000-year plan. Can you talk a bit about, like, everyone talks about 5-year plans, 10-year plans, but you said 10,000-year plan. Why is that relevant?
Yeah, so I did it to provoke just thinking, to not think beyond the end of our noses and just tomorrow. You know, on one side, we know that whatever we plan, the future, all our forecasts will be precisely incorrect. But we want to be able to plant seeds that flourish for many, many years to come in this life and the next. And that's about, you know, if you're able to have a notion early in life where you'd like to be later in life, it can somehow give you an anchor and a guide. The best analogy I can give is the way racing drivers are trained on a racetrack. Where do you think they're trained to have their eyes focus? On the bonnet, or as far as they can see around a curve on the track, as far ahead as they can see? And if you've been on safety driving courses, it's one of the things they teach you to get out of a skid or out of a difficult situation is to look where you want the car to go, far ahead, as a way of anchoring and giving you some focus and giving you some objective to aim for, some lakshya, as it's called in Sanskrit. So that's a little bit what we were trying to inculcate in people at that early stage.
I'd love to hear what your 10,000-year plan is. But so I know that you're a big music fan, and particularly have a particular sort of soft spot for heavy metal and Metallica in particular. So let's suppose that you are, there you go. Let's suppose you're putting together a greatest hits compilation from the ancient texts, right? And you're allowed to choose one verse from the Vedas, one verse from the Upanishads, one from the Ramayana, one from the Mahabharata, and given the Mahabharata is grand, one from the Bhagavad Gita. What are the 5 you would choose, and why?
Well, that's a great, tough question. I think that the Vedas one, I think I mentioned to you, I would go with Gandhi, the first verse of the Isha Upanishad. Did you say Vedas and Upanishads were separate?
Yes.
You did.
You get to choose 2 there.
Oh, how lovely. I have to go with Gayatri. We went through the meaning of the Gayatri Mantra in the Vedic chanting class and how it's a prayer for the highest knowledge. So I may become like you, O Lord, become you, O Lord, and the journey to take me from darkness into light. So it would have to be the Gayatri Mantra. Gayantantra Titi Gayatri, by reciting it, that gives you that protective armor and the energy to go after highest knowledge. I also like Gayatri because it reminds me of always be inquisitive to learn. It's a prayer for knowledge. Never say you've mastered everything. There's a verse in the Canon Upanishad, Yasya matam tasya matam matam yasya nevedasaha. To one to whom it's unknown, it's known to them. The one who says they know everything knows nothing. So never assume you've mastered everything. So that would be the Vedic text. And then I get to cheat with the Isha Upanishad text because that's an Upanishad, but it also sits in the Vedic corpus. Ishavasyam idagum sarvam yatkincha jagatyan jagat, reminding us that this whole universe is pervaded by one reality, one essence that is woven within us, around us, and transcends us. And we are that, and we need to understand our connection to that and this beautiful interconnectivity of the whole universe. I think Ramayana, I would cheat and just say the first 20, 30 verses that lay out the characteristics of an ideal man. I think, and when it tells Rama's character, I just find it inspiring every time. There's one line that I always come back to. How can you tell someone that there's a good person, good energy? Sarva bhikata sabhi samudra iva sindhuvihi. The way rivers flow to an ocean, so do good people flow towards Rama. So be someone where people just are drawn to you because of that positive energy you create and that aura of wanting to do good. That line always comes back to me. I think in Mahabharata, it has to be that verse that summarizes the entire teachings. My grandfather Nana loved it so much. In his book of Urdu poetry, he wrote this down, where, the end, someone says to Vyasa, look, I'm not going to read your 100,000 verses. Tell me in half a shloka the essence of everything. And so Vyasa says, Shloka dhena parakshami. You wanted one shloka, I'll tell you in half a shloka. Yaduktam grantha koti vihi, that which is told in all of these ancient texts. What is that? Paropakara punyaya. To do good to others is a punya, is a benefit. It's on the plus side of your account. Papaya parapidanam. To harm others is a sin. If you just follow that, everything else follows. I love that verse. And then I think in the Gita, I think just this reminder that there is more to us. Ahamatma gudakesha sarva bhuta shayasthitaha ahamadischa madhyancha bhutanam anta evacha. That was Ramana Maharshi's favorite shloka as well. I am the innermost being of the universe. Sarva bhuta shayasthitaha, infused throughout all of creation. Aham adischa, I am the beginning. And adish madhyancha, the beginning. Antascha, the end. Bhutanam anta, aham adischa madhyancha, bhutanam anta evacha, and I am the end of all things. Again, that we live in this wonderful reality where we perceive distinction where there is none. And imagine if we see everything as one unifying whole, just how it transforms your view of everything around you. So those are the immediate ones that come to mind. If I think about it more, I could throw 20 more.
Oh, you're only allowed 5, so we'd have to go and create that greatest hits album now. Final question. So we've given this title to the series, Ancient Teachings for Modern Times. When you look around the globe today, who, from your view, who do you think are the leaders that truly are representing and living the values and the teachings that we have that you have taken us through? Can you kind of give a few examples of those who you think, yes, they've got it?
Yeah, and I think I'll not quite give you the answer you're wanting, because I think it's many unsung heroes that don't get into the limelight. It is those teachers, it is those healthcare workers right now who are selflessly going to protect others. It is those parents who are bringing up children in very difficult circumstances. You see that inspiration. If you go and look, you'll find it all around you. When difficult times hit, or there's some crisis or a disaster, a typhoon or something, people step together, and there will be looters, there will be the other side, but there'll be those who help others out. The rioting that happened in the US recently after this tragic killing and the re-emergence of Black Lives Matter, how people took people into their home at the risk of being arrested. I think there are many heroes out there, those out there who are toiling night and day to come up with better treatments to save lives. And those are the heroes that inspire me, actually, more than any world leaders. I see that inspiration around me and my family in the work I am privileged to do. So it's all there. You just need to go out and find it.
Super. Well, Subhanu, thank you so much for taking us through this wonderful sort of, I'd say, thousands and thousands in years of knowledge, and being able to just present us the creme de la creme that we can then take away and hopefully really use it to make us each a better version of ourselves. So it's been a real pleasure being able to sit here and listen to you and pose questions to you. And I think it's been a fantastic sort of initial series for the PURÂ NAVA lecture program. And actually, on that note, for the audience, so this brings us to the end of this particular series. We'd love to hear ideas of what you want to see for the next series, right? We have some ideas, but we'd love to hear what the audience would like to see, and we'll hopefully kick that off in September. But again, thank you very much. Subhanu, any final words?
Thank you, Raghu. Thank you for everyone who listens to this. Again, the ancient traditions of India extend out their hand as invitation to come with them on this amazing journey. Hopefully we piqued your interest, inspired some of you to go deeper. And if we have, then our work is fulfilled, and we look forward to seeing you at either some classes at the Bhavan or through future courses like this. Thank you very much, everybody.